This story with Andrew Tate's father is a perfect demonstration of how evil and corrupt the US government can be. I want people to listen to this story, what Andrew Tate calls the sad story of his father. I want you to listen to this story and apply critical thinking skills and see if you can see why this is one of the most corrupt, evil things you could ever hear. It's so sad.
Was when they broke up. So the sad story of my father, which I've never told, but I'll tell it now. My father was in the Air Force. He discharged. After they diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder, they offered him a full military pension, $6,000 or $7,000 a month, saying that, you have this mental disorder. We'll give it to you because you were such a fantastic member of the Air Force. My dad was actually in intelligence. Some right-wing people on the internet think I'm a CIA plant because my father was with intelligence. I'm not a CIA plant. But my father was in intelligence. So when my father...
I used to think Tate was in the CIA. I used to think he was a CIA plant, honestly, because his father was in the CIA and was in intelligence. It just kind of logically follows because the Matrix likes to play both sides. So of course you would think Tate is the ops. But okay, I'm starting to be convinced little by little bit that he's not.
Joined the Air Force. He got on the bus, like everyone else did back then in Alabama. Got on the bus. You do an IQ test. My father did so good, they moved him to intelligence. And my father, to this day, still holds, I believe. At the time of his death, he still held it. The fastest assimilation of a foreign language. So back in the 80s and 90s, if they needed someone who speaks Russian, they'd train a native English or American person. Nowadays, you can get an Estonian or a Latvian because they're pro-EU and they speak Russian fluently. It's easy. Back then, you need a Russian speaker who'd teach them. So they taught my dad Russian. He learned Russian fluently in 15 days, head to toe. So he held the fastest assimilation of the Russian language. I know that because when he died, I got a message on Facebook, Meta. I got a message on Facebook from a guy who I never heard of, just saying, hi, you don't know who I am. I was in the Air Force with your father. I heard of his passing. I just want to let you know that I was in the same place as your father. I was a linguist also for the Air Force. At the time, I was living with a Russian woman and we spoke Russian fluently in the house. And your father and I started classes at the same time. And I can say with certainty, the way your father learned things was inhuman. It was robotic. Within 3 weeks, he was correcting me on my Russian. That's who he was, right? So he spoke Russian and Spanish and German. We were also in Berlin at the fall of the Berlin Wall. So he did a lot.
He spoke Russian, Spanish, and German. Like, for what? That's freaking incredible, man. There are people like that, man. Freaking geniuses.
So he was a linguist. So he used to listen to the bugs. If they bugged a room, he'd listen to the bug in Russian and translate it. So that's what my father did. But anyway, when they discharged him, they said he had narcissistic personality disorder. And the reason they said he had that is because he refused to listen to one of his commanders. I don't know the exact story, so I don't want to say it on tape, but he refused to listen to one of his commanders about a recording on a tape. And my father was arguing with him about the translation of a certain word. My father believed it was slang for something else. The superior believed it was something else. They got into a personal beef. It developed over months and months and months of arguments about translations. And eventually, my dad ended up being told to sweep outside for 8 hours a day. And I got to the point where my father got discharged. So when they discharged him, they diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder because they said he wouldn't listen. And they offered him this military pension and he refused it. He said, my sanity is not for sale. And I know that line because my mother used to scream all the time when we were broke in the house. You could have had money, Emory. My sanity's not for sale. Because we went broke. Because now we went broke, right? So I remember them arguing, Emory, we could have had money. Now we're broke. So because he became a professional chess player, he couldn't pay the bills. And we were living in Indiana and South Chicago. We were in the ghetto with no money. So I remember him saying that all the time. So eventually my mother was English. We decided to move back to England because England has social housing. You get a free house and you can get benefits and that kind of thing. We moved back and my father stayed there. So I didn't see my father very much from the time I moved, but my mother was always in charge of keeping me alive and he was just in charge of like giving me the lessons and stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting life, but he was a super principled man. Like he turned down money. What was actually interesting towards the end of his life, about 3 or 4 years before he died. No, it must have been way before that because I didn't have money yet. Maybe 10 years before he died, he called me and said, I've been principled for so long and the way the world's turning and what American government's doing. And maybe I should have just signed. Or do you think I should have just signed? He didn't say maybe. He said, do you think I should have just signed? I said, no, Dad. No, you get to live with a pure heart. You shouldn't have just signed. Because your mother's saying I should just sign it now and because I get back pay.
Sign what exactly?
Sign the narcissistic personality disorder, sell his sanity and get back pay, which at the time would be like $500,000.
But just so you know, a lot of people signed it. A lot of military. I mean, people who got out, you signed, you get all this incredible pension, back pay.
And why do they want you to sign this? Why do they want his father to sign this?
They wanted to sign it because he admits fault. Oh, your fault. You're wrong about everything. You're a psycho. Your sanity is for sale. You sell your sanity for $5,000 a month.
Your disability is for
Your
sale.
disability, yeah.
Ah.
So he found out that he could get back pay if he signed it. So he had a long conversation with me, and I said, look, Dad, I think you did the right thing. I'm so proud of you. And we talked back and forth. And he said, you know what? Your mother, this is the time we didn't have money. Your mother is a dinner lady. My mother was a dinner lady at this point. After we moved to England, we had some things, but she was a dinner lady. She got like $400 a month for cleaning plates. She had arthritis. She was starting to get bad knee from standing up all day. Because, I'm not even with her anymore. She calls me so many headaches, but I can't let her just wash dishes, son. I might just sign it. I was like, well, Dad, the choice is yours. My dad agreed. He goes, look, I'm running out of time anyway. I'm running out of life. I taught you boys a lesson. You know what that I need. He went to sign it. He went to the military to try and sign it for the back pay. They declined him.
You see, and when Tate says that, I'm already thinking, because he says his father was a morbid man, I'm thinking that he either had some sort of illness or people were out to get him. Because of the way Andrew speaks about his father, it's always like he's trying to prepare his sons for his death. And no, he already said earlier in this interview with Patrick Bet-David, he basically outlines how his father was paranoid. And again, he's like freaking Jason Bourne. He can pull the license plates. He memorizes them. So he sees a license plate one time and he memorizes it. And Tate was telling a story about how a car had parked beside his father's car, and he recognized it because of the license plate, and he knew it. And he said the car was there, parked beside them like a week ago, which is so crazy. It's so crazy that people have minds like that. But yeah, the way Tate talks about his father, you would think people are out to get him, or that he's very sick, because he does seem very morbid. But anyways, did you hear what he just said? He went back to try and claim his pension, and they declined it.
He said, you're not crazy anymore. No, wouldn't give him the money. Funny that. So let's talk about, that's another story. So when he died, I still didn't have that much money. But then after he died, luckily I started to make money about a year, 2 years later. And because he tried to retire my mother, obviously I also have an own debt to my mother. The first thing I did when I made money was retire my mother.
So from that story, what you learn is Andrew's father, Emory, had narcissistic personality disorder. And in order to get his pension, the government wanted him to sign papers admitting fault that he had narcissistic personality disorder in order to gain his pension. Do you not see how cruel and evil that is? Because then later on, he's like, I can't have your mother. His mother was a dishwasher, right? And he's like, I can't have your mother just washing dishes, son. And he's like, your mother says if I go back and sign it, I can get back pay. So he went back to go sign these papers to get his pension, and they declined it. They said, you're not sick anymore. And so they declined it. Why? Again, that's the question you always have to ask when you're applying critical thinking skills, is the question why. Person with narcissistic personality disorder will not admit fault for anything. True narcissists, like Tate's father would have been, because he's a genius and he's tall and he's strong. A true narcissist like Tate's father, a genius, isn't going to admit fault.
And why do they want you to sign this? Why do they want his father to sign this?
They wanted to sign it because he admits fault. Oh, your fault. You're wrong about everything. You're a psycho. Your sanity is for sale. You sell your sanity for $5,000 a month.
Your disability is for
your
sale.
Disability, yeah.
A person with narcissistic personality disorder is not going to admit fault for anything. And that's what they wanted him to sign the paper for. So of course he's not going to sign it, and they know that. They know the psychology. They know how to deal with geniuses and narcissists, because that's who the CIA works with. Primarily, it's the smartest people in the society. And that's why they said when he went back to go and sign those papers, he said, you're not sick anymore.
He said, you're not crazy anymore. No, wouldn't give him the money. Funny that.
They knew he wasn't sick anymore because he was willing to admit fault. And because he was willing to admit fault, they knew he no longer had narcissistic personality disorder. That is some cruel, wicked shit, boy. That is wicked. And so they just left him.